It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
When I was a child, my mum, she was very concerned about her daughters and their friendships, and she interfered a fair bit. There was quite a lot of parental disapproval around my sisters, and I have 4 of them, so I can say this reasonably safely, and their friends. And as a general rule, that interference tended to make things worse. There was one time with one of my sisters, she had a strong, keen interest in a young man, and my parents were so concerned about that keen interest that they shipped her off to some family friends in Queensland to try to avert any disasters that might happen if that relationship was allowed to flourish. And guess what, Kylie? It made it worse. Hello, my name is Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm here with my wife and mum to our 6 kids, Mrs. Happy Families, Kylie. And today the conversation is, should we interfere with our children's friendships? Kylie, have you ever been tempted? Have you ever interfered? Have you ever sat the kids down and said, we've got a problem here? And it's your friends. And it's the way that you're acting after you've been with certain friends.
You're hilarious. We have 6 girls. We've had plenty of opportunities.
Oh, my goodness. I know. And it's so hard,
Relationships are tricky, and especially when they're young and immature and navigating this. And let's be real, it's still tricky as adults.
Did you ever have this happen when you were a kid? Like, did your parents ever sit you down and say, don't like your friends, you need to change friendship groups?
I don't actually remember a single conversation like that. I do remember once in my youth being friends with a girl who was a little bit rebellious, and she was struggling to kind of work herself out. And plenty of my other friends' parents had all spoken to my mum about this girl and told her that they didn't think that my parents should be encouraging our friendship. And my mum did something really good, I think. She literally told these parents that she trusted me to make good choices, and that she hoped that my light, my goodness would rub off on this girl. And so my friendship with her continued until I got to a point where I went, you know what? I'm not ready for this. This isn't the kind of friendship I want.
I think one of the central challenges that we face here as well, Kylie, is that when we do interfere with our children and their friendship groups, or their friendships generally, friendship groups are just tricky. There are several reasons for that. One of those is, have you ever tried to change a friendship group? Like, watching your kids try to go from group A to group B can be an exercise in, I almost want to use the word trauma. It can be so hard.
Well, I think that across the board, people see it as an act of disloyalty.
Yeah, what a great word for it, yeah.
You've been loyal to this group, and all of a sudden you're changing, and so the new group's looking at you going, well, if things don't go well here, what are you going to do? You're just going to ditch us? And they don't want to put in the time and energy into a person who seems wishy-washy in their commitment.
And the group that you're leaving feel completely rejected. Like, what, are we not good enough? Are you too good for us? And I guess the other thing that I would add is that when you do interfere with your friendship groups, how does it make your child feel? When you start to say, don't like who you are when you hang out with that kid, your children don't really hear the friendship issue. They really just hear, don't like who you are. You're behaving differently. And that increases that sense of shame. It increases anxiety. And some new research that I wanted to talk about in today's podcast highlights that it gets worse. When you interfere with your children's friendships, it can actually reduce the number of classmates who enjoy your child's company and increase the number who say they dislike them. So there's a brand new study that's just been published in the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry. It's by a couple of Lithuanian researchers. I can't pronounce their names, so I'm not going to try to do it. But it's really, really interesting. 562 students across 6 primary schools are surveyed across a 12-month period. And essentially, the research looks at how much parents are interfering with friendships and how much those kids are engaging in behaviors that are, well, antisocial or rebellious or challenging: smoking, drinking, skipping school, lying and cheating. We are talking about grade 6 kids here. So some of these are pretty high-level challenging behaviors for children at that age. But what's really fascinating is that when mums attempted to shepherd children away from relationships that they thought were bad for their child, they inadvertently created a problem where they worsen the behavioral issues. The kids feel worse about themselves. They end up being rejected by classmates, and then they behave in even more challenging ways again.
Does the article give us any hope
Right. Yeah. So if your children are like, how do you interfere effectively? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
How do I intervene? How do I make sure that my children are going to be okay if I don't like who they're hanging out with? It's a really tricky one. I thought this quote from the lead researcher, I can't actually pronounce his name. His name was Brett Lawson. He says this, and it's really interesting. Youth may report restrictions and their reasons to their friends. In other words, if you express disapproval to your child about a friendship that they're in, your child's probably going to go and blab that to their friends.
Well, of course, because then it gives them an excuse or a reason behind why they can't hang out with that group after school or why they're not allowed to go to the birthday party or whatever. It makes mum and dad the bad person, and hopefully in their minds will keep the attachment and the loyalty of the friendship.
Even at a basic level, though, they just don't have the skills to know what to say and what not to say. So if they're trying to leave a group and they say, whoa, well, we're not good enough for you, and the child says, my mum just says that I'm not a very nice person when I hang around you. It doesn't, like, the child can't win in this situation. If they try to communicate it, they've got no chance. Lawson also adds, or mothers may express their disapproval directly to friends. In other words, mum shows up at the school gate, or the kids are playing in the street or whatever, or in the park or in the yard, and mum says, no, don't like the way this friendship's going, not happy with what's going on here. And either way, the kids they've got no chance here. They can't come back from that. Lawson says, neither are likely to be welcomed by recipients. Friends may respond by spreading contempt or ridicule throughout the peer group. Social opportunities are likely to wither as peers avoid affiliating with someone who is depicted as uncool.
So here's the challenge, and I have watched this time and time again over the course of 6 children and friendships in general. When there is challenge within a relationship, it is 2 ways.
Right.
There is a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, and anyone who can't admit that has some significant blind spots. Okay.
But most of the time, parents feel that their child is being victimized. I'm not talking about bullying, and I need to make that really clear.
Sure. Yes, yeah.
But in normal, everyday communication and relationship, there is challenge regularly. And it is a 2-way street.
Because relationships are tricky.
They are tricky and they're hard. But as parents, we hurt when our children hurt, and therefore we see them as the victim and not part of the challenge. And it makes it really, really hard for our children to learn and grow if we're constantly stepping in and telling them that they're not in the wrong at all and the other person is the big bully.
I really like that. There's one other thing that I would add, and that is that when we do step in, even if we can be impartial and clear-eyed and objective about it, if we make comments that are disparaging about a relationship, about a friendship, it makes the people in that relationship feel lousy about themselves, and it turns them against us and maybe our child as well.
It also, in turn, gives our children permission to focus on the negative behaviors, the negative traits in others. We ourselves have similar negative traits and behaviors. We all do. But we allow our children to see others for the challenge as opposed to the goodness that they possess.
All right, so let's talk about what we're supposed to do, because every now and again there are relationships that our children have where we feel like we really do need to interfere. We're like,
so what do we do?
Why are you friends with that kid? A little bit earlier, I love what you said before about your mum's example here. She just trusted in your innate goodness. She trusted that you were able to figure this out for yourself. And it's really hard for me to say this, and I know it's really hard for every helicopter parent on the planet to hear it.
I don't even think you have to be a helicopter parent. I think this is hard. Relationships are hard, and watching your children
every well-intentioned parent who wants to interfere, we want to get in there and make sure that our kids are okay, make sure that they're not behaving in challenging ways, make sure that they're not doing the wrong thing. As a general rule, so long as there's no bullying going on, and so long as your child is not at real proper risk of real proper harm, then I would say leave it alone. We've got to stay out of it. It's worked pretty well for us as a general rule with our kids. In fact, you know what's really, really interesting to me? There have been a few friendships that our children have had where I've wanted to interfere. I've wanted to say, you know what, I don't think that kid's quite the right one for you to be friends with. Can't you find another friend? We've stayed out of those relationships. We've let our children figure it out. And over time, some of those friendships have become the most enduring and positive relationships that our children have had. And in other instances, our children have naturally grown apart from that friend as time has gone on and things haven't felt quite right. There's real wisdom in just staying out of it, not helicoptering, and giving them space.
Last week on I'll Do Better Tomorrow, I shared the experience of sitting down with Emily and talking about some of the qualities that make a good friend.
Yes.
And through that conversation, we talked about what she could do, what areas could she focus on to be a better friend. Relationships are these really, really tricky part of our lives where there is so much richness and opportunity for learning and growth. And as parents, when we step in, we actually often hinder our children's ability to grow.
But that conversation you had with her, and I don't know if you've still got the paperwork here in our little podcast studio. You don't have it? Okay. Those 6 things that she came up with to be a better friend, they were facilitated through a conversation, not about a specific friendship, but about friendship generally.
Yeah.
And they were profound. I mean, this little 10-year-old's brain and heart, just absolutely gorgeous what she came up with. It was tremendous. So if you're concerned about friendships, maybe having that sort of a discussion. And if you'd like to go more in depth, just go back to last Friday, our I'll Do Better Tomorrow, because that's where the real gold was there. There are 2 other things that I want to highlight here. The first one is that if you do interfere, first of all, this research highlights that it can be quite negative. One of my colleagues at the University of Rochester, Professor Chris Nemick, did a study about 10 years ago looking at the forbidden fruit of forbidden friendships, and pretty much found the same thing, that when parents interfere, the kids are drawn more to their friends. They start to resist their parents.
I was about to say, you actually become the bad guy, not the friend.
Yeah, that's right.
The friend that you're trying to protect your child from becomes the forbidden fruit, and you become a person who is untrustworthy.
They start to shift away from us as parents at the very time that we feel like they need us the most.
Yeah.
And this study here, again, let me just emphasize, as parents demonstrate reduced peer acceptance and start to interfere, their children become less popular at school over the subsequent 12 months, and they have more conduct issues. In other words, it doesn't work. It's a bad idea. Explore, explain, empower, talk about friendships more generally, but nothing specific. And I think overall, the take-home message from today's conversation is, when you don't like your children's friends, trust your kids. Don't hover. Give them space. They'll work it out over time. And so long as they're safe, it will be okay. We will link to that study in the show notes, as well as Chris Nemick's Forbidden Fruit, Forbidden Friendship study, so that you can have a quick look if you're inclined to look at the academic side of things. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. And if you'd like more information about our awesome, incredible Parenting Autism course, we have an early bird special on the course right now. You can find all the information at happyfamilies.com.au or on our social media platforms at Instagram and Facebook.